Like, George, yeah, I got you, man. I got you. Keep watching. Okay, so the first effect we're gonna get into is this iconic gun flash with the gun sound. So you can just see the gun flash is like this, got some sparkles on the side, and then dissolves out with a little bit of smoke. So let's just find where we want to put these gun flashes exactly. He does like the trigger finger, so I would say like around here. Let's press S on the keyboard to scale this up. Let's just put it there. Okay, so now we've got one. Does another one. Let's put one there. So let's see what we've got. Looks alright so far, but that's quite basic. And like, if you ever watch any of George's videos, like, he never does anything basic. Cool. We've got gunshots, but there's no shake on them. You want to add, I put S shake, sapphire shake on mine. So on the gunshot, I just created a keyframe, and then 2 frames before I've just created another one and just set it on 0. So that just means that on the gunshot it's gonna start shaking, but it's just like giving this crazy shake throughout the whole thing. But I think for this one, we're gonna go 2 frames after the gunshot, create another keyframe so that this shake is held for like 2 frames, then another 2 frames afterwards, and we'll just set this back at 0. It's very subtle, you can't really see it here. Let's turn on motion blur. I think that might even be too short. Let's make this duration of the shake longer. I think maybe even a little bit more shakiness. So on this 3rd keyframe, I'm just going to change this to 2 just to see what it looks like. Do you know what? I like that, but I think the 2 should be on the 2nd keyframe. So it starts off no shake, then like intense shake, and then slowly just slows down. And then we have another one here. So what we could just do is copy and paste, and then just drag these keyframes so they're aligned back up with the gunshot. And then I actually think these shakes are a bit too long now. Let's try make them a little shorter again. But the next thing you need some gun sounds. So George actually says that he uses his from like a video game. So I've just got like a bunch of Call of Duty gun sounds here. We'll just go through them. But I think let's try the MP7. I like the sound of that. MP7 or MP5, either one. Now if you press L on your keyboard, you'll bring up the waveform here. You just click there and you can actually see like where the sound's happening. So let's just go to the flash. Let's move this here. Cool. And let's add another one on this flash here. And what else you can do just to sell the effect a little bit more is go into this pre-composition where we just have our gunshots and our footage, create an adjustment layer, and add brightness and contrast onto it. So whenever you have like a gunshot, you can make the screen go a little bit brighter. Keyframe it, maybe 2 keyframes before, put it on 0. And then 3 keyframes afterwards, put it back on 0. Let's see how that looks. We're gonna dive into like this paper effect. He's done it a lot on like Ice Spice videos. I'll put some references on screen. Okay, so you're gonna start off just rotoscoping your subject out. Let me put this back on full. You always want to do your rotoscopes on full just to get the best quality out of them. So we're just gonna freeze this in place. Okay, so once you've got your rotoscope, go back into your composition and you should just have the artist by itself. So you want to duplicate this layer, Control D, and let's remove the rotoscope from the bottom layer. So now you can see that if you solo this, it's just a background, and if you solo this, just a rotoscope. So what you want to do next is just pre-compose this bottom layer, move all attributes into the new composition, and add an effect called posterize time. Now I'll show you what this does. If we just had the rotoscope and we change this down to, let's say, 6. Oh, let me turn off those audios. When we turn this down to 6, this is the effect. So it's kind of like jittery now. So yeah, I'm going to put this paper effect in the description for you guys to download. But basically, it's just like a stop motion video of like paper crinkling. You watch it. It's quite slow. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click it, go to time and time stretch. Let's try 35. Yeah, I think that could work. So we're going to put this in between the rotoscope and the background layer. Toggle switches and modes and just turn this to, I think it's soft light. Cool. So now you can see we have this paper effect on our background. If you switch back on posterize time, the background will be moving and the paper. Turn off the rotoscope. This is what it looks without the rotoscope. So the next step would be fixing the rotoscope. As you can see, we've got a lot on the outlines here. So what you can do is you can shift the edge, you can add a feather onto it, and just play with it until you get a result that you like. Because I rushed my rotoscope, mine's not going to be perfect. I'm going to try an effect called Refine Soft Matte. Okay, that's kind of done what I wanted it to do without me having to dial in the feather and the shift edge. Okay, so that's basically the effect, but to sell it a little bit more, what we can do is duplicate this rotoscope. Let's solo it so we can just see this. What we want to do is actually go into the rotoscope, change this from mask to rotor brush, and unfreeze it. We want to invert the foreground background so that we just have the background and freeze again. Let's shift the edge and let's feather it a lot. Let's go into content aware fill and let's generate a fill. So now it's just analyzing. And once this is done, we'll be able to replace the background layer with this, so we don't get that weird echoey effect. Okay, so once your fill layer has been generated, you'll have a layer without the artist. So what you want to do now is we'll just hide these. So you can see here, we've got like echoes of the artist popping out. So what we'll do is let's just make these visible again, Control X, and go into this background layer and Control V. So now the background layer is just going to be the background without the artist. So now when we go back here, instead of having that weird echo, we don't have that anymore. So it's just the background. And then the last piece of the source is to add some text in this background layer. So if we go in here and we get the text tool, let's write Dominic. Line it, let's put it in the middle. Okay, so this is what it looks like, but let's add some movement and some displacement onto the text. So let's put on turbulent displace. Let's change the amount to say 17, and let's keyframe the evolution. Let's go towards the end frames and let's make this go like that. So now when we play it back, we've got this text warping, but with the posterized time effect, it's jittering as well. You can add like a Gaussian blur onto this, helps sell the effect a little bit more. Okay, for the next effect, we're gonna do this Roto Shake slide effect. So what you want to do, you want to put this back in full, rotoscope out your subject. Okay, so once your rotoscope is frozen, you'll just have the rotor. So let's duplicate this, remove the rotor from the background layer. So now you want to duplicate the rotor and you want to put an effect called offset. What this effect does, if you change this value here, it just slides the rotoscope. So let's create a keyframe on the very first frame and let's go through, let's change this value. So this is how many times it will be sliding. And you just want to line these back up. Doesn't have to be perfect. That will do. So now if you watch this back, we have pretty basic effect. So if we try and put the motion blur onto this layer, nothing happens. So what you got to do is take this off and put an effect called RSMB onto it. So now you can see we're getting that motion blur on the rotoscope layer. Again, we need to just fix this rotoscope. So yeah, you can go into the feather, shift edge, but for this, I'm going to use refine soft matte. So it looks a little bit better, but we want to change the speed. So let's press U on the keyboard and bring up the keyframes. Press F9 to easy ease them. Now these are the keyframes that we have. Let's change this to speed. So now we can see it's the fastest in the middle and then it kind of slows down. So we want it to ease in. So slowly start sliding. And maybe ease out a little bit as well. Let's just drag out these keyframes to make this a little bit longer. Okay, so once you're happy with the speed that the rotoscope's moving at, what you want to do is select all the layers and pre-compose them. Now when it starts, you want to add shake onto this and keyframe the amplitude. Press U on the keyboard to bring up your keyframes and just go to the layer where it's just about to start. So let's go to the very first frame and click 0. So now as the rotoscope's moving, it's shaking. Let's go towards the end. So let's go here, add another keyframe. And then when it stops, let's just keyframe this back to 0. Click motion blur and let's see what this looks like. So that's the base of the effect, but I think it's a little bit too strong. So let's change the amplitude where it's 1 to 0.5 and on this keyframe 2. Let's play it back. Okay, for the last effect, well, last two effects, but I'm going to merge them into one because it's like similar things. We're going to do like some of the transitions that he does, like we'll do like rotation, transition, or slide transitions. So I'm going to show you how I would do those. So you want to start with your two clips. On your first one, you want to apply blur mode curves and set a keyframe 3 frames before the end of the clip. If you press U on the keyboard, you can see where your keyframes are. So 1, 2, 3. We'll just start with 3 just to be safe, but I think we might have to change it. So what we'll do is we'll set a rotation keyframe and go a couple frames ahead and rotate this to 90. If we hit reflect here, we won't have those black sides anymore. So right now we're getting something that looks like this, whereas rotating clockwise. And then on this second clip, we add blur mode curves. And we want to create the same clockwise transition. So we'll set it like this. Minus 90, go 3 keyframes, and put this on 0. Now if we click reflect, this is roughly the effect. So it's just all these niggas gonna hate on the all these niggas gonna hate on. So we have something that looks like this. But what we can do with the keyframes, select them, press F9 and go into the editor. So we could say that maybe it starts off slower and then it gets faster as it starts spinning. And if we move these keyframes a bit out, we'll really be able to see that happening. All these niggas gonna hate on the. You can do the same, press U on the keyboard, select these keyframes, press F9, go into the graph editor, and we could make them faster and slower at the end. And then the last effect we're going to do is like a zoom in and zoom out effect. So what he does is he'll add like a blur mode curves on, create a keyframe for the Z position, go a few frames forward, and he'll go in like this. And now usually like what you'd do is probably try and recreate those keyframes and make like a seamless transition. But what he does is he'll go into the second clip zoomed in and then have it zoom out. So it gives it kind of like a bounce effect. So that looks pretty good already without like any tweaking, but let's tweak the keyframes. So select your keyframes, press F9, and let's just give them an ease out. Go back into here, let's see what that looks pretty clean. Let's do the exact same to these keyframes, but instead of doing ease out, let's do ease in. So we know that all our actions happen in here, and these are just like the ease parts. So cool, that's a bit quick. So let's drag these keyframes out, make it a little bit longer. Cool. So then with these two selected, pre-compose them, and we're just gonna add some shake onto it. So again, S shake, keyframe it at the start, amplitude 0, go into the middle, change this to maybe 1. Press U on the keyboard just so you can see. And then when it finishes, do 0. See how this looks. So yeah, that's basically the zoom in, zoom out effect. You know, I gotta end this off by just giving a big shout out to George Buford, man. His effects, top tier. His videos, top tier. That shit be inspiring me and shit. No cap. That shit he did with D-Dot in the clouds and that, bro. Or the 3D environments. Trust me, there's so much more shit to cover. So if you want more, hit like, hit subscribe, and maybe I'll do a part 2.